Nothing says 21st century American leadership like a Nobel Peace Prize winner taking a break from his busy golf schedule to lie to the people who elected him about an ideology that calls for our annihilation. But there is a silver lining to the dark cloud of President Obama's naive and utterly predictable speech about the Islamic State. I've been inspired to write a children's book. Once upon a time, there was a beautiful country called Fantasyland, where saying something over and over again makes it true. The king of Fantasyland sat in the country's loftiest ivory tower. He spent his days gazing dreamily out a window, counting the candy-coated raindrops as they fell on a pavement made of birthday cake. One day, the king noticed something else falling with the candy-coated raindrops. Why, it was his approval rating. Apparently, the citizens of Fantasyland, though they are the most pampered and privileged people in the entire universe, are nevertheless notorious whiners and crybabies. The king was sad that his subjects didn't like him as much as they used to, so he decided to cheer himself up by taking a ride through Bubblegum Forest on his favorite unicorn. As he trotted out of the capital of Fantasyland, Denial City, the king thought to himself, "I wish I could just get away from all of these complainers." But every wish comes true in Fantasyland, so the king was magically transported to a faraway place called Planet Reality. Since the king was educated in Fantasyland, he had no concept of reality. Imagine his surprise when he looked around and saw piles of dead bodies, bombs exploding, and women being dragged off to be raped. "This isn't how things work in Fantasyland," said the king. "Wherever could I be?" The nameless, faceless victims around him replied, "Welcome to Planet Reality." The king was confused. "What's causing all of this misery?" he asked. "Lots of things," they answered. "But the most immediate source of death, bombings, and rape is a book called the Quran." "The Quran?" laughed the king. "Don't you mean the Holy Quran?"
The Holy Quran, the Holy Quran, the Holy Quran.
"I know all about the Holy Quran," the king continued. "I've been promoting it for years. Where I come from, the Quran is what makes the sun shine and flowers bloom and ice cream taste yummy." "Well," said the nameless, faceless victims, "that may be how the Quran works in Fantasyland, but here on Planet Reality, it commands Muhammad's followers to oppress and kill non-Muslims and hypocrites." The king was annoyed. "You must have done something to hurt the feelings of these folks who are coming from around the world to rape and slaughter you. I'll show you how to win their hearts. I'll get my wife, the queen, to hold up a sign that says, #Hey, stop raping and killing everyone. Then I'll give a speech telling these hurt feelings folks that their religion doesn't teach any of this. When they hear my speech and see that I respect them, their hearts will melt, they'll drop their guns, and they'll step forward for an embrace of mutual affection and understanding. That's how we solve problems in Fantasyland." The king turned away and headed straight for Rapistan, the heart of the Islamic State on Planet Reality. As he approached the gates, the jihadophiles, who enjoy a good laugh as much as a good beheading, welcomed him with open arms. After all, they couldn't have raped and butchered so many people without the king constantly warning their enemies not to cross red lines. So the least they could do was listen to his quaint little speech. "I knew they'd be happy to see me," the king thought, and he began his speech.
Let's be clear about ISIL. They have rampaged across cities and villages, killing innocent, unarmed civilians in cowardly acts of violence.
The citizens of Rapistan erupted in laughter. "Dear king," they said, "our beloved prophet conquered all of Arabia in 10 years. What was his secret? He tells us in Sahih al-Bukhari, 'I have been made victorious with terror.' Not negotiation, not compromise, certainly not hope and change. Terror. That was his secret, and the Quran commands us to imitate him." But the king ignored them and went on with his speech.
They abduct women and children and subject them to torture and rape and slavery.
"So," the Rapistonians replied, "torture, rape, and slavery are a problem? In Ibn Ishaq, Muhammad ordered his followers to torture a man named Kanana to find out where some money was hidden. The Muslims lit a fire on his chest to get him to talk. Then they chopped off his head. As for rape, after the Battle of Khaybar, Muhammad's companions asked if they could rape their captives in the presence of their husbands, who were still alive at the time. Allah gave us his answer in Surah 4:24 of the Quran, which says that we can rape them all we like. As for slavery, our Prophet enslaved thousands of people, and he had slaves himself, including black slaves, O King. He even had a sex slave, a young Christian girl named Mary the Copt. So when we torture, rape, and enslave people, we're only obeying our Prophet, as Allah commands. The king again pretended he didn't hear them.
They have murdered Muslims, both Sunni and Shia, by the thousands.
His listeners couldn't contain their amusement. But King, our Prophet commanded us to kill apostates, and his closest companion, the first rightly guided Caliph Abu Bakr, declared that anyone who diverges from core Muslim practices is an apostate. Abu Bakr waged war against hypocrites and apostates. So when we kill Muslims who aren't really obeying Muhammad's commands, we're only doing what we're told. The king paid no attention to them.
They target Christians and religious minorities, driving them from their homes, murdering them when they can, for no other reason than they practice a different religion.
The laughter grew. "O King, Allah commands us to attack and subjugate Christians in Surah 9:29 of the Quran, where he says, 'Fight those who do not believe in Allah,' not 'live in peace and harmony with those who do not believe in Allah.' How could Allah be any clearer that we're supposed to fight people because they practice a different religion?" The king pressed on.
They declared their ambition to commit genocide against an ancient people.
"Are you not hearing us, King?" the rapists shouted. "We're not killing them because of their race, we're killing them because of their religion, and only if they refuse to submit to Allah." But this is exactly what Muhammad said he was commanded to do. In Sahih al-Bukhari he proclaimed, "I have been ordered to fight the people till they say, 'There is no God but Allah.' And whoever said, 'There is no God but Allah,' Allah will save his property and his life from me." Once again, we're only imitating our Prophet. Are you condemning us for it? The king didn't answer.
So ISIL speaks for no religion.
The rapists sighed. "Ah, now we know where you're from, O king. You're from Fantasyland, aren't you? That's the place where everyone speaks for our religion, except the people who actually follow it." The king continued.
Their victims are overwhelmingly Muslim, and no faith teaches people to massacre innocents.
"As we've said," they rejoined, "Muslims who refuse to obey Allah are not innocent. That's why we're commanded to kill them as apostates and hypocrites. But if you're referring to Mr. Foley, he was an American. According to Allah, anyone who attacks a Muslim land is to be killed, and according to Muhammad, anyone who funds the attack is to receive the same penalty. Since the American military is funded by American taxpayers, Mr. Foley was already under a sentence of death. We only did what we were commanded." The king was too focused on his own words to hear anyone else.
No just God would stand for what they did yesterday and what they do every single day.
Here the listeners began to grumble, and many reached for their beheading knives. "Now, King, we've shown you that everything we're doing is done out of obedience to Allah. Yet you just said that no just God would stand for what we're doing. Are you calling Allah unjust?" The king, not wanting to suffer the same fate that thousands of others were suffering, answered, "I have to say these things for now, but don't worry. I'll have a little more flexibility after the midterm elections." At this, the king began to click his ruby slippers together, saying, "There's no place like a golf course with Alonzo Mourning. There's no place like a golf course with Alonzo Mourning." And as the king was being whisked back to Fantasyland, every rapist in Rapistan shouted, "Goodbye, King. We hope all the carnage here on planet reality doesn't mess up your golf swing." Suddenly, the king woke up and found himself on a pile of birthday cake with candy-coated raindrops landing gently on his face. "Oh my," he said, "I must have fallen off my unicorn. I guess reality was just a bad dream. I can't believe I ever wanted to get away from Fantasyland, a place where the worst consequences of my decisions are low approval ratings. After all, My approval ratings are a small price to pay for the endless trunks of money I'll be getting every day for the rest of my life. Who needs reality when fantasy is so much more convenient for me? The end. Well, that's the story I came up with. I know it's kind of dark for a children's story, but someone has to face reality.
No words to describe the finality. The animal, hooded in black, in the process of decapitating an American, forced to his knees, his hands bound, his head pulled back. And you, Mr. President, fist bump your friends within minutes on the golf course? Why not just admit it? You don't want the job. You want the perks, the vacations, the golf. You don't want the responsibility. You can't make a decision. You live in a make-believe world colored with vanishing red lines.